Forest market report is the largest analysis and the most thorough analysis of the market for forest plantations carried out in the UK. This is our 17th forest market report, and as a result we've got a very long and extended data set.
My name is Fenning Wellstead, and I'm going to talk to you this morning about our experience of the forestry market, presenting woods to the market, some of the fundamentals that underpin value, and a brief look at the future and some of the political issues. It's been a busy year. I'm not going to steal any of Jason's thunder because he's going to tell you how busy it's been. But it's a small market. If we look at the Forestry Commission statistics of 1.6 million hectares of conifer timber, only about half of that's in private ownership, and a smaller part of that is the really commercial blocks. Probably 2% of it gets sold in 1 year, so it is a relatively small market, although the values have grown quite strongly over the last decade. In this report, we focused on coniferous woods greater than 20 hectares in size. Press the right button. And this is the sort of thing we're talking about. This is a woodland in the Borders, 142 hectares, so in theory quite a big wood, but you'll see that it's surrounded by farm fields. It's got awkward shapes, long fence lines. It's very pretty, and it's got sporting attributes and some very vigorous crops, but it's not necessarily the meat and drink of the big timber industry. One of the features of this year's data set is that large-scale forestry properties have been more dominant. And by large scale, I don't necessarily mean bigger in total area. Here's one in Wales. It's actually half the size of the previous slide, only 70 hectares, but it's a simpler wood to manage. But better still is something like that, which looks pretty boring from, if you like, an environmental point of view. But if I was a farmer and that was a field of wheat, I'd be quite happy. Since we're looking at crops that are, in this case, about 30 years old, we're beginning to think about harvesting. I'd like to look at what's happening in harvesting, because the fundamental of timber investment is growing a crop that we cut down. We take the view that harvesting is almost akin to a marketing, a sale of the property. I know timber selling is regarded as income for tax purposes, but in many ways it's realization of a capital lump that's been building up over time. So marketing of that is important. So if we look at a woodland here in the Scottish Borders, which sits across the skyline here, and which has been a feature of my commuting life up and down to the Borders virtually all the time I've been a forester, it doesn't seem to have changed at all. It's just a green mark on the horizon. But if we look more closely, and this photograph was taken a year ago, and the telegraph poles are helpful, but it's not the telegraph pole here that's important, it's the one down here close to the trees. You begin to realize that this has grown quite tall. But going inside to the forest, nothing's really happened. It's now been there for 40 years. The road is still not quite a muddy track, but it's not ready for lorries yet. There's been a little bit of light thinning. You can see some openings here. But basically the crop has been left to grow. How much timber's there is the key question. And if you go back to the wheat field, that almost feels like being a mouse walking into a field of wheat. That is what we're growing. It's commercial spruce, and that's where the money is that pays for everything. I don't think anyone had measured that timber. We put it on the open market, and we thought there might have been about 600 tons per hectare. But we put it on the market at a guide price of around £14,000 a hectare, based on a conservative timber price, based on the cost of sorting out roads, and based on people's view of the future and what had happened in comparable markets. In fact, that sold for well over £20,000 a hectare. If we look at something of the same age, and this just gives you a bit of variety, not in species, it's spruce, it's exactly the same age, but it's a lower yield class. You can see it's not as heavy, it's not as dark, but it is also ready for felling, partly because it was beginning to suffer from windblow. It's had the same treatment, a little row of trees taken out. That yielded 507 tonnes per hectare at a sale price of just over £35 per tonne. There's the harvesting operation underway. So an income per hectare, a shade under £18,000. And of course, we still own the land. So I think there are two key messages I want you to take from this, is that as the crops mature, you need to know what's there, and it's worth paying to measure it. It's not something you can just walk in and eyeball. You do need to think about measuring properly. And secondly, I think, is to remember that a vigorous crop of spruce, which we've been looking at, doubles in volume between 30 and 40 years of age. And quite often people get excited about felling, I think, a bit too early and miss out on potentially an exciting terminal bonus. There's a nice productive wood in Dorset, currently on the market. And with firewood prices down in the south of England now at £70 a tonne for standing beech, this is not an uneconomic crop. But quite often people manage these things as a pretty wood, and there's every chance that can be run commercially with all the benefits of capital tax that I'm sure you all know about. I'm not going to emphasize tax at all here. If we've felled trees, we need to restock the land. And here I'm just looking a bit ahead and looking at statistics. The Forestry Commission's published statistics record 11 million tonnes being harvested from UK forests. If we assume, and this might be optimistic, 400 tonnes per hectare across that whole spread, that's 27,500 hectares, maybe approaching 30,000 hectares. The same document records 17,500 hectares being restocked. Our question is, does this mean that effectively 10,000 hectares have been removed from productive forestry and future timber supplies? Given that the percentage of the restocking is not likely to be 100% spruce, which that compartment is, but in the forestry as a whole, we're planting broadleaves, open space, and so forth to meet diversity targets, the situation might be worse than these broad figures suggest. This is not practicing sustainability as far as timber supplies are concerned. But if we look at the UK, we are a massive importer of timber. We use far more than we grow here. And on a global basis, one of the questions must be, how much longer can we continue to export our demand for timber to other countries? Across the UK, forestry supports about 40,000 jobs and generates about £2 billion a year into the economy. It's a valuable rural asset. And if you take subsidies out of it, forestry is more effective than farming. So for the taxpayer, it's a better return.
We've got a new record, £151.15 million of commercial forest property. This is the year ending 30th of September 2015. 98 forests, 18,435 hectares. Record-breaking year all round. So it's 81% up on the year. Fantastic result. You go record area sold, 18,400 hectares, but not by much. 98 transactions, second largest since 2006. Average 188 hectares, which is the largest since 1999. Average sale price, just over £1.5 million. New record, 8.5 times what it was in 2002. So looking at the trends in the value per hectare, there's actually a good correlation with timber prices. Again, this is because of the investments in the UK timber processing industry. The sawmilling industries, for example, has effectively doubled its market share in the UK over the last few years. If you plant a tree, it will keep growing whilst you're sleeping. So, what's stopping you? Trees are ready. Thank you.